Dr. Kennedy, hello. Welcome to Flocking Together.
Thank you, Sarah. How are you?
Excellent. Happy it's Friday. Glad to be here with you.
Yes, likewise. I've been looking forward to this.
Nice. Well, let's jump in. Folks have been watching our series so far. They've heard from a couple of our partners and friends and colleagues. So excited to get you in the space here. And I just want to share, first of all, I have really enjoyed knowing you as a colleague and friend. We met years ago in a training space and have since been able to collaborate on things like the biographical timeline cohort, working on a chapter together, which is really fun. And I've just actually, I don't know if you know this, but I've come to consider you a mentor of mine because I really admire not just the work that you do, but how you communicate about just the bigness of what we're all up against when it comes to healing, when it comes to learning, supporting, navigating this world that we're in. So yeah, it's a joy to have you and hear more about you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I feel the same way about you. It's been wonderful working with you and seeing how you do your thing and inspire people, especially in the work that we do around timelines. It's been excellent. So I consider you a mentor, a colleague, and I'm definitely happy to be here with you. Thank you.
Nice. Yeah, great. Well, I have this first question I've written down and want to just kind of throw it out there. You can take it in whatever direction you want, but who are you in this world and what lights you up about the work that you do? You can take that in any direction.
All right. So first of all, I am a Black woman, and those two identities show up everywhere I go.
Mm-hmm.
And I see the world through that lens. I'm a mom. I have two
Mm-hmm.
boys. They're 17 and 13. So I have one
Yes.
that's about to be a senior and one that's about to be a freshman.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yeah, that's happening all at
Yes.
one time. And I'm also a lover of people and justice. That is my core value, and everything that I do in my work is centered around really moving people who are marginalized in our society to higher ground. And so
Mm.
that shows up in the work I do as an educational consultant. And I am also a family ambassador for the school that my boys go to. And so that means that every day after I do my work with teachers and administrators across the country, I'm then getting on phone calls and calling families and talking to
Wow.
them and asking them what's happening, how are you doing, are there any resources that you need? And so I really just enjoy being with people, using the gifts, talents, common sense that I
Yes.
have to help others. And so um, that's what I do, and that's what brings me joy. That's what lights me up, especially when it comes to serving children.
Mm. Well, there's now 1,000 more questions I have on my little card here, but this work is not just professional for you, it's personal, like you just shared. And I'm curious especially when you say things like, I like to bring my common sense to the table. Why is that important to tap into that and the work that you do, we do?
I think so much of it is really about common sense. It doesn't have to be, things don't have to be complicated.
Mhm.
And I learned that very early on in my career. My first job out of college was I was working with individuals with dual diagnosis. So they
Mhm.
had a mental health diagnosis and also developmental disabilities. Now, I had a bachelor's degree in psychology,
Mhm.
but what really I needed was just my common sense
Yes.
to help me, help the folks that I'm working with navigate the system that they're in. And so it doesn't have
Mhm.
to be complicated. If you approach the work with passion, with your heart, I think that's a big part of what will guide you. And that's always been my guiding light is just passion and common sense.
I love it. I think it's a tagline somewhere. It makes sense why we've connected because I think part of our efforts we can speak to any crowd, but really dropping in and relating with people is not just a core value, but that's a practice, I think.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I hear you talk a lot about is around are the systemic barriers to common sense. I don't know if you said it in that way, but I think sometimes the way we label people, the way our paperwork is set out, it divorces us from our capacity for common sense. And there's a phrase you've used when talking about youth that is different than I hear a lot of other places. You talk about youth of promise. Can
Mhm.
you can you just speak to that a little bit and how that I mean I think this common sense thread is where I'm also taking that, but how is language really important in the work that we do?
Yeah, language is so important. It's foundational, really, because the language that I heard a quote actually not too recently, and it said, and I can't remember who said it, but it was the words you speak become the house you live in.
Mm,
So that is just, it's so foundational and true.
yeah.
The way that we talk about the youth that we are working with matters. If
Mm-hmm.
we can't speak of them in a way that is asset based, that is strength based, that is rooted in a growth mindset, then we really can't help them the way that we want to, because the words we speak really reflect our mindset. And
Mm,
if we have a deficit mindset about the youth or the folks that we're helping in these systems that we work within, then we're not really bringing our best to the work, because we're coming at it from a mindset that says this person needs to be fixed, or this
mm,
person is flawed, or something deficit. There's something deficit about this person. And so
mm,
it's really important that we really check ourselves for bias,
mm,
for deficit thinking, so that we can really make sure that we are seeing a whole person
mm,
um, when we approach our work. People don't need to be fixed.
mm,
Systems, I think, need to be fixed, but I don't think people need to be fixed.
mm. Yes, 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 yes. The phrase I guess at risk youth is the one that we hear, right? And it's almost numbing. We use or hear the phrase multi-system youth, right? And again, I think that that's an it plays not just into our bias, but our unconscious devaluation, right? So I just love those shifts at promise youth, or even how you talk about uh, uh, help me understand or help me remember. You talk about um, youth surviving threatening systems, not
Yes,
multi-system youth, right? Yeah, unpack that a little bit because
youth
I've
navigating.
always,
Yeah.
yes, go ahead.
Youth navigating threatening systems.
There we go.
And I think it's important to describe youth and individuals who are in systems that way, because, again, when we phrase it that way, then the onus is on the system to get better. It's on the
Mm-hmm.
system to be reformed, not on the person.
Mm-hmm.
Again, because it goes back to, youth they're navigating the system. They don't need to be fixed.
Yeah.
They're in this system that needs to be fixed. And
Mm-hmm.
so when we describe it that way, as youth navigating threatening systems, well, then it makes you think, well, why is the system threatening? How is the
Mm-hmm.
system threatening? And what can I do to fix the system and not the
Mm-hmm.
person?
Well, it puts our energy at the root of the problem, right? And you are skilled at helping people go 30,000 feet up and understand the systemic barriers that impact our ability to heal, to connect, to nurture. And one of the things you've done, or where you're working on, right, probably in progress, is taking this understanding of a timeline, right, a trauma informed timeline, and looking not just on a person's history, understanding their current behaviors in the context of their life experiences, but you've pulled that out to look at a system, specifically systems of education or institutions or organizations with this similar lens. Um, I don't want to talk too prematurely because I know you're in the process of that work, but can you share a little bit of one, why you had that interest to look at systems through the timeline lens, and how's it going? What's evolving from that?
Yeah, thank you for that question. It started as an idea because I had, at the time, just started working within the education system. And I was working in a school every day, school in the inner city with
Mm-hmm.
lots of at promise youth.
Mm-hmm.
And I was seeing a lot of things that disturbed me. And I had the thought that, you know, I love history and I'm a history buff and I've always have been interested in history and how things came to be. But I
Mm-hmm.
know that everyone doesn't have that same frame of reference.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a understanding because of my own personal quest for learning about the history of the school system, how things ended up the way that they are. But I knew that some of the teachers that I was working with didn't know. And so I thought that, if I came into this building and I didn't know anything about the history of, you know, how this system ended up the way it is and how all of these kids ended up in this school with being under resourced and all of these things, I could probably, if I didn't know, I could probably confirm every bias,
Mm-hmm.
every racist idea that I had about who these kids were.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought that it was really important for educators, especially, to know the history about how all of this came to be. Because if you
Mm-hmm.
don't know, you think it's always been this way, or the students are in this situation because they don't value education, their parents don't value education, and I
Mm-hmm.
know that that's just not true. And
Mm-hmm.
so I thought that it was important for us to go back and look at the history of the education system. And so I have been working on timelines with you
Mm-hmm.
and thought that that was just a perfect way to walk educators through this history of the education system as a way to highlight what had been happening and use that as a way to kind of dismantle some of that
Mm-hmm.
structural racism that is embedded in the system. And we we all know that, and it's happening even in our society today. We don't want to talk about the history. We don't want to talk
Mm-hmm.
about what really happened, actual American history.
Mm-hmm.
There's power in knowing that. And
Yeah.
when we don't know it, then we are more likely to perpetuate it and
Mm-hmm.
perpetuate negative outcomes. And so the timeline as a way to highlight history was just a tool that I thought would be super important to help dismantle some of the things that we see happening in schools today.
Hmm. I love that you didn't. Well, two things. One, you saw a problem, and it sounds like you activated your empathy center to understand. If we don't know, then I can imagine how we get there, right? So we need to know. And you didn't come at that from a space of top down training or teaching. You really had this power with to help people themselves. I would imagine share out bits of history and find themselves naming where these ruptures have happened, where these barriers have been put into place. And so I would imagine there's like a felt body sense of knowing that comes out of that experience, not just an intellectual offering,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, absolutely. We give
Mm-hmm.
folks in that going through the timeline opportunities to put themselves on the timeline, put
Mm-hmm.
your own experiences and history on there, and when we do it as a group, folks get to see their experience in the context of what was happening on the larger scale and what
Mm-hmm.
other folks who have different identity markers were experiencing at the same time. So it's a really
Mm-hmm.
powerful experience for
Yeah.
folks to have.
Mm-hmm. Well, now just a little aside here, a little more personal, not just professional, and not on my cue cards, but you said at the beginning of our time that justice is one of your core values. And again, when as a learner, as a researcher, as a history buff, you saw an answer to discussing these issues. Where does that come from in little Dr. Kennedy? Where does it come from in your upbringing? What drives you to act on those awarenesses versus not? Yeah, where's that drive come from?
Yeah, well, thank you for that question. Growing up, I didn't have, the perfect life, but I did have I consider some privileges. And so I was able to go to a really, well, I'll say a great high school, but
Hmm.
great according to, like whose standards. But
Yeah, yeah.
one of the top high schools in the state of Ohio.
Mm. Hmm.
And that came with some privileges. And so it allowed me to, you know, get exposure to some things that my peers who didn't go to the same school as me were exposed to.
Hmm.
And so when I left high school and went to college, which was a phenomenal experience for me, I went to a HBCU,
Hmm.
Tennessee State, so go Tigers.
There we go.
Um, and so it was really there
Mm.
at Tennessee State where I was surrounded by people who looked like me,
Mm.
and had all different kinds of aspirations to do all different kinds of things
Hmm.
professionally, um, that inspired me. And I
Mm.
had a teacher, I had a mentor that pulled me aside after I had finished my last class senior year, and he pulled me aside and said, you're about to graduate and you have a responsibility.
Mm.
Now that you have this degree, your responsibility is to go back and help other folks coming behind you. And
Hmm.
so I took that to heart, and I knew that I wanted to help people. I always knew that
Hmm.
I wanted to help people, but after attending TSU, I knew
Mm.
that it was a responsibility and that it was
Hmm.
my calling to do that. And so everything, I've always been really drawn to justice movements, social justice movements, and things like that. And so I always wanted to make sure people who didn't get a fair shake got all of the resources that other folks get because they're worthy. And I always
Hmm.
believe that. And so that's
Hmm.
where it comes from. It's having privileges myself and
Mm.
wanting to give back and knowing that I had that responsibility because that's what was taught to me as
Hmm.
a result of attending the HBCU.
Getting chills over here just even thinking about that moment of like someone who is a mentor who believes in you, who tells you you have a responsibility, not again, not out of power over, but as an uplift. And it reminds me of the work we're doing right now with our colleague Danae Riggs, talking about relational resilience, really how important, not just important, that's a little too light, but how necessary that relational capacity is, and to have people in our lives who believe in us, who continue to walk with us. Um, Again, not on the plane to talk about right now, but I didn't know if you wanted to speak to that a little bit, or where your how relational resilience even shows up in the not just the work you do, but how you lead, how you connect with others.
Yeah, relational resilience is a big part of what I bring to my work, especially in coaching. I do a lot of work with adults in the education system,
Mm-hmm.
and I have found that it has been so liberating to just build relationships and to treat people like human beings. Um, and by that, I mean like just checking in with folks before we get to the
Mm-hmm.
business or whatever it
Mm-hmm.
is that we have to cover. Just checking in. How are you feeling? I use lots of different tools to bring that out. I might use a mood meter or a feelings wheel or some
Mm-hmm.
kind of, opening question. But it's really just giving folks an opportunity and holding space for people to just say, this is how I'm feeling today. This is what I'm bringing to the
Mm-hmm.
space. This is where my energy is. And what I've learned is that in the education system, too often folks don't get to like bring their emotions or bring that part of themselves to the work.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's been so important, and I've seen the ability for transformation in just allowing people to process how they
Mm-hmm.
feel
Mm-hmm.
about, especially now with all of the things that educators have been through with the pandemic, and then
Mm-hmm.
this year trying to navigate going back to school with all of this going on. They need a
Mm-hmm.
space to process
Mhm.
emotions, and that helps to build trust, which helps to build
Mm.
the relationships, which helps to bring out that resilience so that they stay. Our children need consistent folks in the
Yeah.
classrooms, and so my job is to, when I'm working with someone, to help them build up that resilience so they can be consistent for our
Mm.
young people. And so,
Mhm.
processing, holding space for folks to bring their emotions to work is an important part of my job.
Mhm. I was asked recently, is it all as simple as relationships? And I reflected back, it's not about the simplicity, it's as profound as centering relationship. And that's just what I heard from you, right? I didn't hear you say I go in with the new tool and tell a teacher to use it and they go, right? I offer that space, right? I support their full development, which we hear a lot about social emotional learning for kids. And I hear you talk a lot about, hello, social emotional learning for adults is equally as necessary. And so how are you
Absolutely.
bringing that concept? I've even heard some people think that's just such a radical idea that adults need social emotional learning as well. But we do. We're
Yeah,
also
yeah,
human.
we
So
do. We
yeah.
do. We're
How are,
human,
yeah.
and
Yes.
we can't develop social emotional skills in children if we don't have them ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
How can we
Mm-hmm.
teach them? How can we model them if
Mm.
we don't possess them? And
Yes.
so, it's not so much that we all arrive, it's a
Mm-hmm.
practice, it's a journey, and
Yes.
we have to continually be in that practice as adults. And
Mm-hmm.
it's in how we relate to ourselves, how we relate
Mm-hmm.
to others, peers, and how we
Mm-hmm.
relate with the young people in our classroom. And
Mm-hmm.
so, yeah, social emotional learning for adults is definitely a thing. It's
Yes.
needed, it's necessary, and that's a part of the work that I do is helping adults learn how to be more humane to
Mm-hmm.
themselves, to each
Mm-hmm.
other, centering humanity and love. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's so much of what we need. We need
Yeah.
more humanity and love in our systems.
Mm-hmm. Well, I agree tenfold. I could name 50 people I know who agree, and I know we're still in a world where that could be dismissed or demeaned as fluffy or woo woo, etc. It's not. We know the neuroscience of love and how we could talk about that. But I'm more interested in hearing you talk about, in your humble opinion, with all of the changes in our world, right? With all of the pressures and traumas that have come through the pandemic, and really, there's so much in our. I'm trying to get to our education system. It feels like there's this new, or this, we're on the horizon of either burn it all to the ground and rise up, or still try to navigate with all the stressors we have going on in the current system. Where do you see the field of education going? Like magic wand, where do you see it going? Where do you hope it goes? Maybe those are
Yeah,
two very different questions.
yeah.
But
Well, as you were talking, and quotes come to me quite often, so I think
nice.
this is the second one. Um, but I've been reading a lot of Octavia Butler lately,
Mm,
and if you haven't read Octavia Butler, I just finished Parable of the Talents, but also Parable of
okay.
the Sower. Um, I would say read it. Um,
Okay.
it's not cheerful,
Mm,
but it's very
mm-hmm.
real. And one of the things that she says in her book is, in order for a phoenix to rise from its ashes, first everything must burn.
Mm,
And so I think where we're at in our education system right now is there are some things that are burning. Um,
mm-hmm.
there are some old ways of being, some old ways of knowing and doing
Mm,
that are burning. But
mm,
there are some folks that are actively trying to put the flames out. Okay. So
yeah.
wherever we are trying to go, and I'll get to where I hope that we go, it will be a challenge. It will
Mm,
not be easy because there's a lot of opposition to
mm,
creating more liberatory,
Mm,
truthful education systems. What I would
mhm,
love to see happen is just that our education system becomes more liberatory,
mhm,
more safe for folks of all identities. That's
mm,
one of my biggest wishes for our youth is that school will be a place where they experience
mm,
identity safety. It's
mm,
okay to be who you are, and I would love to see all students' cultures be reflected in the learning and the curriculum, that teachers are culturally responsive as well as trauma responsive.
mhm,
And, it won't be a cakewalk. It won't be easy
mhm,
to get there.
mhm,
We, even folks who want us to get there, like myself,
mm,
even I have a lot of learning to do still to make that happen, and we all do.
mhm,
So I'm
mhm,
not sure that I will see those changes
mm,
completely happen, the vision that I would love for education to completely happen. But I think what's happening right now is that we are setting the foundation, we're planting
mhm,
the seeds for the education system that we want to see in the future. And
mm,
hopefully, my grandkids will benefit from the
mhm,
work that I'm doing today.
mhm,
And for right now, what I do is just my best to cover the babies, make sure the
mhm,
babies are okay, as much as I can, and protect them as much as I can. But
mhm,
we have a long way to go, and we have a hard fight ahead of us.
mm,
And it's not a cheery answer, but
mhm,
that's the truth of where we are and what I see every day.
mhm. I think it's hopeful. I know it's not cheery, but we don't need cheerleaders. We need we need fighters. We need people who are radical in their approaches. I put
Yes.
that in quotes because I've been called radical for emphasizing community building. Like these things that we need as human beings to survive, to thrive. And so we need to keep moving forward one step at a time. What fills you up? Why I we know from your upbringing you have a passion for justice. Your mentor said you're the next one, right? You want to keep going and giving back to others. But day to day, you could put your hat anywhere and not be one of the people moving this effort forward. What keeps you going in your day to day practices?
What keeps me going really is what has always kept me going, and that is the children. It's
Mm-hmm.
my love for them and my desire for the future that they have. And so,
Mm-hmm.
anytime when I'm feeling, like, I'm just exhausted, I'm tired of this,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to do this no more, and I have those days.
Yes, sure.
Sure. Especially working in systems, there's a lot of opposition, and I get that way sometimes. But what
Yeah.
always keeps me coming back is thinking about the future and
Mm.
what am I, it's legacy. What am I leaving? What kind of system am
Yeah.
I leaving for not only my kids, but
Mhm.
my kids' friends and their community? What kind of world am I going to leave to them? And so I'm always thinking about what's going to be left for them. And
Mm.
so that's what keeps me motivated. That's what keeps me going. That's what keeps me charged when I get
Yes.
tired. I always come back to that. It's a futuristic
Yeah.
mindset about what
Mhm.
what will be the world that my children will inherit and my
Mm.
grandchildren will inherit.
Mhm. You have your North Star, your guiding light, and it sounds like you just have meaningful work, and your passions are supported by your profession.
Hmm.
Um, where do we find you? What do you want to be doing in the future work wise? How do people find you, and what's on the horizon as you keep taking your
Yeah.
steps?
Yeah, well, you may find me one day in your education system if you are an educator. I'm definitely doing some work with school systems and districts across the country, doing some work with Philadelphia, doing some work with New Mexico, Chicago.
Nice.
And
Yes.
so, if you're in any of those areas, you'll probably see me. If not, I would say go to my website, pioneeringconnections.com. send me an email if you're interested in learning more about the work that I do or you want to see how we can connect.
Mhm.
I'm also on LinkedIn. You can connect with me there. But yeah, I'm out here. I'm doing
Yes.
trainings, I'm doing webinars, working with the National Center for National Center for SEL and School Safety.
Okay.
Got a
Yeah.
webinar coming up with them soon. So yeah,
Mhm.
I'm out here.
Good. You're in high demand. I know. Yeah. Well, I'm so grateful, even just for this time that we get to hear your voice and your offerings. I listened to a podcast recently where you were highlighted, so I'm going to link that in our show notes or by however that fancy stuff comes out. But I look forward to your leadership again next year in our new timeline cohort, which is going to be upcoming, which is going to be great. You're a quote person. Any quote you want to end on to offer out to us as we all try to take some of your passion and your purpose into our pockets and hearts as we move forward.
You know, um, I would just leave you with my own words. And one of the things that I've been trying to center more in my work is joy.
Mm.
So I've been giving myself this advice, and so I would just give everyone listening the same advice. And that is move in the direction of whatever brings you joy. Whatever that is, move in that direction. That's what I'm trying to do. Um, let's let's see what we can do. Let's see what happens when we center joy and pleasure in
Mm.
our work.
Perfect place to land. You bring me joy, so I'm coming your way. I'm sure everyone will see you soon. Thank you for this light and your work in the world and just your full humanity you offer to all of us, Dr. Kennedy.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, we'll see you soon.